Hi everyone, welcome to LA Legal. I'm Liana, and as always, I'm joined by Nima Romani. We'll be talking about Vanessa Bryant, but thank you for joining us all the way from Florida. Please tell our viewers what you do, who you are, and then we'll get started.
Well, thanks for having me. This is a great setup you guys have here and a great podcast. I think it'll be continuing for a long time. My name is Michael Elkins, labor and employment attorney and sports attorney from Miami, Florida. I've been practicing 22 years, primarily in the areas of labor and employment, management, defense, so not plaintiff's work. We can certainly talk about that, and sports law as well. So a lot of name, image, and likeness deals, a lot of contract negotiations for professional athletes.
So happy to have Michael here all the way from Florida, defense perspective. We're talking Vanessa Bryant. Obviously, we're big fans. We have the biggest Kobe Bryant mural in the city on our building, for those of us that don't know. Shameless plug. Actually, we got the rights from Vanessa Bryant to Granity Studios in Deer Basketball. So I'm not biased in any way. I just want to put it out there that a little bit.
Just a little bit. But if you're local, definitely come by and check it out. It really is amazing. The field trip we hosted the other day, actually, we told them how they put the entire mural together in about like 24, 48 hours. I mean, this entire wall
Really?
was painted
Wow.
in under like 2 days.
They wanted to get it done for Kobe Day, which was August 24th, the same day as the verdict in this case.
So on January 26, 2020, a helicopter carrying legendary basketball player Kobe Bryant and 8 others, including his daughter Gianna, crashed into a hillside in Calabasas, killing everyone on board. Fast forward to February 2023, a Los Angeles federal jury awarded damages to Vanessa Bryant and her co-claimant, Christopher Chester, after determining that the LA County Sheriff's and Fire Departments were liable for infringing on their constitutional rights for taking and sharing gruesome photos of the January 2023 helicopter crash.
I didn't actually know about it until we were talking about doing this and it was a suggested topic. My thought was, at first I was like, I don't understand how this even went forward, because my understanding is one of the arguments, the primary arguments of LA County, I guess, was that she had never even seen these photos. And then I started to dig a little deeper. I guess what happened was she told, I think it was the sheriff, I could be wrong, whoever was in charge of the scene, please make sure to lock it down so there are no photos. That had to be a critical component of this case. The fact that she said to do that, they said they did it, and then apparently it didn't happen. I guess they settled the case after the verdict, several months later. I don't understand how in this jurisdiction, if they didn't get summary judgment, how did that case get in front of a jury? Like, who said, let's take Kobe Bryant's wife and family and put them in front of a Los Angeles County jury? Sure, we have a shot at that. How did that happen?
A couple things happened. One, our former sheriff, Alex Villanueva, was an unmitigated disaster. We're talking about constitutional violations left and right. He's out of office. But whenever you're suing public entities in California, I don't know what it's like in Florida, it's very hard to go to the state, the county, the city, and say, hey, I want to pay millions, tens of millions of dollars to settle a case. So I'll give you the city of LA, for example. Florida. Yeah. So most deputy city attorneys have a $50,000 basically threshold. Anything else, they got to go to someone higher in the city attorney's office, and anything above that, the whole council has to vote on it. So, you put it on, obviously there's going to be a closed session, but when they're going to vote on something like this, there's going to be a lot of folks there, gadflies, who are saying, hey, we have homeless people, we have potholes in the street, we have all sorts of problems in the city, and you're going to write a check for X amount of money. So what the lawyers do is just say, you know what, I'm just going to push this to trial, get a judgment, and if it's a judgment, well, we got to pay the judgment,
Sure.
So it's just really the lack of, let me just say, intestinal fortitude to stand up to your constituents and say, hey, this is a high-risk maneuver. We're going to get slammed. And instead, they let the taxpayers pay the money. And that's the problem we have. I mean, we see it all the time. If it's a county case, state case, city case, that case is almost certainly going to go to trial.
So I represent local governments in Florida and primarily labor and employment matters. So it's kind of the same thing. There's always a threshold, right? That a dollar amount that, even it goes from like HR can settle a case at this level, then it goes to the city attorney and up the ladder. And in Florida, there's no punitive damages against municipalities. I don't know if you have the same thing here in California. But still, this is, and I understand that calculation, especially working with local governments. But sometimes the formulaic calculation like that is a little different when it's this situation, when it's the whole situation with Kobe Bryant and Vanessa Bryant and the children and this community and kind of what he meant, still means. I just think it's interesting. I don't know if they went for summary judgment. I'm sure they tried that. They did. And I think it's interesting that it couldn't get worked out before it just, because it's compounded now, right? Sure. Because it went to trial, not a good result at all for the county. A lot of bad evidence, just not good. And it doesn't sound like anyone calculated, well, what's going to happen with this plaintiff in this jurisdiction at a trial?
Given the law, given the facts, given the conduct, and we'll talk about it, right? The things that these deputies did, I mean, you're going to get slammed. It is not a case that should have gone to trial.
Yeah, so obviously the people that are watching, you're talking about the LA County Sheriff's Department, and why does it have so many problems? So LA City by far is the biggest city in LA County, right? They have their own police department. LAPD has had all sorts of problems dating back to Rodney King, but there's a police commission that oversees it. It's overseen and regulated in a very different way. The sheriffs, they have jurisdiction over the smaller cities, right? That maybe don't have that oversight. Some of the poorer communities, right? And that's why you see all these different scandals involving the LA County Sheriffs. Part of it's just, it comes from above and their leader that doesn't care about civil rights. I mean, you had allegations that there were literal gangs in the sheriff's department. The feds are investigating. They point in inspector general, and the sheriff says, listen, I'm not going to investigate my own deputies. I'm not going to police them. So there's this culture there of the sheriffs, not LAPD. We don't really care what the law is. We're going to do what we want. And it was that sort of cavalier attitude that ended up getting them slammed. And look, I'm sure they filed for summary judgment. Munger, Tolles, and Olson, huge firm. We used to be in the same building, was representing the Bryants. So they got past summary judgment. But there were a couple other plaintiffs who actually settled. And turns out they settled cheap. They settled for $1.25 million.
Whoa.
Yeah. And, look, I don't know if Vanessa Bryant needs the money. She probably didn't. She donated it all to Mambasita. But, sometimes you go to trial, not for the money, but to send a message,
Sure.
Johnny Depp is the biggest example, right?
But I don't blame her at all. And I don't think it was a money grab. I mean, again, she's got all the money in the world. I think this was more a message where, like, you're messing with my family. And let's not forget that there's photos of her child potentially circulating. I mean, I don't blame her for bringing suit at all.
I mean, to me, the critical fact there is she told them to lock it down. At least this is what I read about. I think she testified to this probably, that she told them initially, lock that down so there are no photos at the very beginning. And she insisted that they do that. So my guess is, I don't know her, obviously didn't participate, but that this probably was more of a, wait a minute, I told you to do this. You did not do it. So yes, we are going to go forward.
Well, let me ask you this, right? Does she really need to tell you not to take photos or to lock it down, that there's no photos being taken and leaked to paparazzi? Like, is that really something that, especially given who's in that helicopter crash? Like,
yeah, but some of it, and I'm not saying it was like a cover up per se, but so Michael, obviously you do defense, right? Shit happens in a workplace, but some of it is, what's your response? If you're representing someone and you have a racist, a harasser, whatever the case may be, someone's just like blatantly violating the law, you're going to shit can them, So the investigation afterwards was lacking. There was little to no discipline. So that's the type of thing that can piss off a jury.
I didn't feel like there was really any accountability. There was really close to no investigation being done. So I think the whole thing was botched from A to Z.
I mean, I work with a lot of internal affairs departments because I do a lot of work in police departments relative to like police officer discipline. So I know that internal affairs departments, they're very stressed. They're maxed out. Those investigators really, the ones I work with, do an amazing job. But sometimes it makes sense to have an outside independent group investigate. Rarely, it's not a thing you would do all the time. But in this situation, given everything around it and what they had to know was coming, that probably would have been the play, is to bring in an independent third party who has no ties whatsoever, figure out what happened here and take some action. I don't know what happened, if they took any action against the deputies that, had these photos.
I mean, would you not be pissed if you're Vanessa Bryant or any of these people?
Oh, absolutely.
This is mind blowing.
Yeah, so
stuff.
I think it's a couple things, and Liana and Michael talked about it. One is, of course, look, it's Kobe and Vanessa Bryant, right? I don't know what the equivalent is. It's like if Dan Marino and I don't know who,
Tom Brady and
J Lo, and somehow had a
in
baby
New England.
and became the hero of Miami.
Right.
So look, celebrities do well in most trials, but if you're talking about in LA, the Bryants, that's not someone you want to go to trial with. Number one. And you raised another good point, Leona. It's like there's no acceptance of responsibility, right? If the defense comes out and says, "What's the big deal?" That's how you get a runaway jury verdict, because you're pissing people off, and people already don't want to be in jury duty, right? No one wants to serve, and now you have someone that's basically lying to your face that this isn't a big deal. Well, that's how you get slammed.
Did she really even need to tell them to lock it down so that there were no photos? And I guess the one of the defense points here was she never saw the photos. So what are the damages? Right. That was kind of mind-blowing when I read that. Like, the case was pretty clear that it wasn't about her seeing the photos that was going to be problematic, although she talked about that. It was the idea that they were out there in the public domain. I mean, this is her child and her husband. That's incredible that the position was, well, she didn't see it.
And that's the thing, like, the emotional distress is not attaching to the fact that she saw them. It's just the knowledge that they're out there, other people saw them, and they could resurface. I mean, look, we live in this era of, media, and people are hungry for these kinds of things. Who would buy and look and want to see these kinds of photos is beyond me, but people will pay good, like, I'm sure TMZ would pay millions for a photo. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, once it's out there,
Sure.
it's out. You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube, So I absolutely agree. You shouldn't have to say it, and then once it's there, it's there.
Yeah. Well, so this firefighter, right? So he airdrops it. It's to another unidentified firefighter. So there is someone out there. How is he unidentified? You don't know who you sent it to.
Well, that's part of the cover-up, right?
Yeah.
So they ask for the phones. They're either not provided, they're wiped, the devices are wiped. And one other thing, I mean, look, they brought experts. It's just not about Kobe. They have these, like, death books dating back to, like, the Polaroid days where they would go... And
Wait, what?
Yeah.
So
LA
it's
County.
like a thing that
Wait.
Yeah.
You have. I'm sorry. Can you say that again? Can I get some
Yeah.
clarification?
What's the
What is
this?
this?
Is it like a death book? Is
Yeah,
that what
they
called?
called it death book at trial, that dating back literally to the Polaroid days, and they just keep these photos of, like, body, like, was it celebrities specifically or just gruesome
It's just
deaths?
like gruesome, different types of deaths. It's like,
I understand celebrity fascination. I get that. That's a very common thing. And so and so's at the airport. I mean, that's fine, but that's not what this was.
yeah,
I mean,
corpses.
this was,
I think.
like, what are we talking about?
Beyond the pale. So the case goes to trial, but it's just on the federal claims, right? The constitutional claims. Then there's all these, like, state law claims. I mean, basically they double up when it comes to the settlement, right? So it's originally Vanessa gets a $16 million verdict. It's reduced to 15 because of some juror error, and she's fine with it.
Clear.
Then they settle the remaining claims for Vanessa and the kids' estate claims for another 13.5 million. So basically she gets almost 30 million as a result.
And the other, I think, parent or surviving spouse got kind of somewhere near there.
He got 15. So if hers was reduced, his was 1 million less. But let me ask you guys why you think that is.
Celebrity lives are worth more. I mean,
$1 million more.
At least according to jurors. Well, it's not just the verdict, right? Because it was 15 and 15 ultimately. I think the jurors wanted to do the same. But when you talk about the settlement, they paid. Well, it was less than 5 million versus almost 14 million to the Chesters.
I mean, I think a factor of that is, right, if one of the elements of the distress is I worry about seeing my child and husband's, dead bodies on the internet, then the celebrity factor plays there, right? I mean, that's what's going to end up on the internet more than, not that one life is, I'm not saying one's worth more, but the
likelihood, I think, of it.
Yeah, the reality is as sad as in no one's searching for a Chester corpse.
Yeah.
I remember Bob Saget's family. they filed to prevent
Yeah.
the release of the autopsy because, generally speaking, these are public records, right? And of course,
Right.
the media is all over it.
And Florida has a robust public records law. We call it the Sunshine Law. I'm sure
Yeah.
you guys have something similar. It's hard to get things sealed in Florida.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but
Yeah.
really very difficult.
Gavin Newsom in September of 2020, I actually didn't know this, he signed an invasion of privacy bill called the Kobe Bryant Act. It basically makes it illegal for first responders to share photos of a dead person at a crime scene for any purpose other than law enforcement purposes. It's a misdemeanor punishable by up to $1,000 per violation. So this makes me laugh.
Look, I mean, it's a slap on the wrist, and, it's a problem in this country. Law enforcement, they're not held accountable. And I have respect for them, former prosecutor. Many, many people put their lives on the line to keep us safe, but the ones that don't, they're not held accountable. Because at the end of the day, even though the county got hit, nothing happened to any of these deputies. They're not going to pay.
Oh, there was no discipline?
Well, there's some discipline,
Yeah,
right?
there
But not
must
a
have
whole-
been
Yeah,
some internal
there's definitely
discipline.
some discipline, but they're not paying any of this,
Right.
right? They're not writing checks. They're not
Right.
losing their
No.
pension. It's business.
I don't
as
even
usual
think
for them.
anyone was fired. It was literally
No, I don't
just
think so.
internal discipline.
So as someone who represents cities and municipalities and with a niche and a specialty in police officer discipline, at least in Florida, and I think generally across the country, very, very, very difficult to fire a police officer.
Yeah.
And I do defense work, so and I respect law enforcement officers. I work with chiefs of police, majors, captains, people outside the union, and we obviously collectively
Yeah.
bargain against the union when the union attempts to get officers their job back. I'm one of the individuals that is hired to represent the department in the city. It's just hard to get a termination to stick. I wonder, and I wasn't able to find out, if the county did try to discipline and maybe, there was an arbitration over that or it got worked out through a collective bargaining grievance process.
Right.
It's just hard sometimes.
Yeah, well, part of the problem was they said, well, the sharing of the photos was part of the investigation, right? So at least the position they took
Eye
at
roll.
trial, well, this was all.
I
police
wish my
business as
eyes could
usual.
roll back
Yeah.
further than they are.
Yeah, how they really took that
They
position?
took that position.
I mean, how
Part of the investigation, you don't even know who you
bar?
airdropped these photos
yeah,
to.
showing it at a bar? How is that part of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
investigation?
or at a cocktail hour. I mean,
Yeah.
why do you even have them on your personal phone is my question, right? Because if you're showing them at a cocktail hour, like, why is it on your personal phone? Is there
the
no,
chain
like,
of
work
custody,
phones?
you got to
like,
get the evidence. You're like,
Yeah.
hey, man, it's in my, like, let
Air-
me pull up my Facebook album.
Airdrop?
Yeah.
How
Let me
does that even
airdrop
come
this
up?
to you. And she donated the money, right?
Yeah, she donated the money to the Mama
yeah.
Sita Foundation. But yeah, I mean, going back to the three areas of the law, right? You got criminal. We know these officers aren't going to be prosecuted. You got administrative, right? Very difficult to navigate through that process. I mean, there's so many rights there. So then you're dealing with civil, right? Well, maybe hitting the county's pocketbook or whatever. I mean, the city of Minneapolis for George Floyd. I mean, maybe that will affect some change because
Yeah.
that's a lot of taxpayer money, and that's what people get voted out of office.
Yeah.
So, I'm surprised though that they didn't, and I don't know that they didn't do this, but a lot of times what will happen is the jurisdiction will say, look, we are going to fire someone. We're probably going to lose at arbitration, but we would rather an arbitrator tell us you're going to put this person back to work versus not doing anything.
Exactly.
So that's
it's
kind
the
of an
optics
interesting angle.
sometimes, right? And I think LAP or the county of LA really failed in that optics department, right? They did close to nothing to show the public that, hey, we're trying to figure this out or we're fixing it, we're investigating. It just seems like,
Yeah.
eh,
Yeah,
sorry.
that was part of the problem, the circle the wagons mentality, I think that's what, and the lack of accountability even years later at trial where they're minimizing what happened. You got to make sure to follow Michael
Yes.
on social media.
Thanks.
His LinkedIn, Instagram, fire, TikTok too. Just let them know where they can find you.
You can find me on Instagram at Melkins, MELKINS1. TikTok is the same, at Melkins1. LinkedIn, Michael Elkins, and MLE Law. And also, you guys, your content's amazing.
Oh,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. So happy to have him here in person. Definitely give him a follow. You got to know
Appreciate
the
it.
defense side as well.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Great
you so
to be
much
here.
for flying out here. And for all of you at home, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.